Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Rosheen Roaring Prophet. Now, Rosheen is not a card that is official yet. This image is from a leaker that posted on Reddit, but Rosheen is in the new Modern Horizons 3 set that will be coming out in a couple months. But I wanted to get a head start on it, so here's a deck tech for Rosheen. When Rosheen Roaring Prophet enters the battlefield, mill 6 cards. You may put a card with X in its mana cost from among them into your hand. Then we can tap it, reveal any number of cards with X in their mana cost in our hand, and then we add 2 colorless for each card revealed this way, but we can only use that mana on spells that contain X. So this is just Rosheen X spells. Why play Rosheen? Because Rosheen is Metalworker in the command zone. Metalworker is reveal any number of artifact cards in your hand, and we add 2 colorless to your mana pool for each card revealed this way. Now, Rosheen is limited because it only does that on cards with X in their mana cost. Which is a little bit awkward, but I mean, it's still, we're an X-Spell deck, so we're going to have so much mana generated off this. So we're going to play Rosheen. We're going to pick 6 cards from the mill that enable her. We're just going to take the best card, return it to our hand. And then X-Spells are nice because they let you choose how much mana you want to put into it. Let's say, for example, like, you don't have to put all of it into one spell, so if you want to try and do a couple smaller multiple X-Spells in a turn, that also works out. Or if you just want to, like, let's say it's like, oh, well, I want to pay 10 mana for this X spell, but I do want to hold 2 mana up, so I want to get the biggest creature I have, but make sure I still have enough mana to do whatever instance I want to do, which is also great. And then Rosheen works as the best Gruul commander for an established archetype, in my opinion. Rosheen actually already exists as Rosheen Meanderer, which we will see, which is just Gruul X-Spell Tribal back in the day, but this one's new, and in my opinion, it's way, way better. Here's the game plan. We don't need Rosheen to win. Rosheen is great because she'll draw us essentially a card after looking at the top 6. And she taps for a bunch of mana. But at the end of the day, we're just an X-Spell deck. So we don't need to have her on the field all the time. Ideally, we want her on the field all the time. But we don't need her to win. She just gives us a lot of mana and a little bit of card advantage. So early game, in an ideal world, we just want to play some rocks and ramp, get as much mana as we can out as quick before we play Rosheen on turn 4, which we're going to do mid-game, get an extra card off that. And then late game, we're going to tap Rosheen, and we're going to reveal basically our whole hand, all of the X-Spells to get, like, a ton of mana. 6 to 10, I decided, is, like, an average amount from having, like, 3 to 5 X-Spells in our hand at a time. Either way, we're going to get a lot of mana. We're going to dump that into big, scary creatures, and we're going to use those big, scary creatures to win the game. Channel and deck stuff. The deck cost about $383 at the making of this video. It's kind of pricier than I thought it would be. And if you need any of the cards, just in general, get the cards you need from the link below and help support me in the channel. And then just like, comment, and subscribe to the channel because that also really, really helps it grow. Anyway, we have one battle, and the battle is Invasion of Ikoria because it costs X green. When it enters the battlefield, search your library and or graveyard for a non-human creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. I don't think we have any non-humans, right? So, cool thing about this card is since most of our guys we have like a lot of guys to trample. I'd say most of our guys have trample actually. So they're going to come in right away, and then after casting this, we can just attack them, and most likely they're not going to be blocked because they have trample, so we could very easily flip into Zolathora, or however you pronounce it, Apex of Ikoria, real easy, who just says reach, and for each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So, for damage sakes, our creatures are unblockable. Like, we can just straight up very easily kill a player with that. Going into creatures, I decided not to do Hydra Tribal on this, just because Hydras are great and all, but it's kind of like with the new Warhammer deck, there's so much good support for just X spells now that, like, just some of the Hydras just don't, they're not as good. So we have a Baron. He is 1 green X. He has Ravenous. This creature enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. If X is 5 or more, draw a card when it enters. Then he has Trample, and then when he deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So a lot of these guys are just going to say, they're going to enter with X11 counters. I'm going to try to ignore that and just focus on the abilities. Ravenous is a special one because if X is 5 or more, it'll draw us a card. But either way, we're just going to put a bunch of mana into him, get a big guy, draw a card, and then use him to pop artifacts and enchantments. Apocalypse Hydra enters with X11 counters, you know, but if X is 5 or more, it enters with an additional X counters. So whatever you pay into it, it's doubled up if it's 5 or more, which is pretty cool. So at the very worst, it is a 7 mana 10/10, which is pretty good. And then you can remove a counter from Apocalypse Hydra by paying 2 to deal 1 damage to any target, which is great for just pinging off little guys. We have Genesis Hydra. It has a whole Hydra X counter thing. Whenever you cast a spell, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So that gets us a free spell essentially going along with the big Hydra itself. The issue with Genesis Hydra, and there's Genesis Wave in this deck too, which we'll see in a bit, but the issue is that a lot of our creatures enter as 0/0s. So if we rip Apocalypse Hydra or a Baron off of Genesis Hydra, it's going to enter the battlefield as a 0/0 and die immediately. So we don't want to do that. That's just something we got to be cautious about. Goblin and Necromancer or Anarchaeomancer, whatever it is, right? He's a 2 mana cost reducer. We're a green and red deck. He reduces green and red. Sounds good to me. Goldvein Hydra is brand new Vigilance, Trample, Haste, does the X counter things when it enters, and then when it dies, create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power, which is really good because we can use those tapped treasure tokens when it dies to cast another, even bigger Hydra. Hooded Hydra, you know, the whole X counter things, when it dies, create a number of 1/1 green snake creature tokens for each counter on it, which is good because, again, like, if it dies, it's not that big of a deal. We still get a benefit if it goes away. It has morph if you want to morph it. And when it's turned face up, put 5 1/1 counters on it. We don't really ever want to do that just because Rosheen lets us just pay the X spell raw. So it's kind of better to just do that rather than try and morph it and flip it. Hungering Hydra enters with X counters on it. It can't be blocked by more than one creature. And then when it is dealt damage, put that many 1/1 counters on it. So it's annoying to block, can't be blocked by more than one creature, so it's almost always picking something off, and then it only is going to get stronger. Damage isn't prevented, though. Remember, damage is not prevented, so Death Touch will kill it, but if someone blocks with like a 5/5 and it's like a 10/10, now we have a 15/15, whatever. Colonian Hydra, it is 5 mana, no X. We have a couple cards that have no X. Enters the battlefield with 4 1/1 counters on it, and then when it attacks, double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. That's why we're running it, is because we want to double the number of counters on all of our guys, because almost all of our guys have counters on them. At least the guys that are going to win us the game have counters on them. We have Kodama of the West Tree. He's reach. Modified creatures you control have trampled. Equipment, auras, and creatures you control with counters on them are modified, and since all of our guys have counters on them, they're all modified, so they have trample. And then whenever those modified guys deal combat damage to a player, search your deck for a basic and put it on the play tapped. Really, really good. It just ramps us for simply attacking. Lifeblood Hydra, green, 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 X. It does the whole enter with X counters, and then when it dies, gain X life and draw X cards equal to its power. It's great. That's like the nice thing about a lot of the Hydras is like when they die, you still get a benefit off of it. So it's like not the end of the world, you know? And it's also incentive for your opponents not to kill them. Magus of the Candelabra is pay X, untap X target lands. The reason we're running him is because he helps Rosheen filter that, you know, let's say like 10 mana we get from tapping Rosheen and showing off 5 cards. We can use that mana to dump into the X of him to untap a bunch of lands. So we can essentially, in a weird roundabout way, not perfectly either, turn some of that colored or colorless mana, colorless restricted mana, into just regular untap land colorless mana, which is good. We have Moloch. It's, you know, Ravenous enters battlefield. If it's 5 or more, draw a card. When he enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls, and if that creature would die, exile it. So he's kind of like a fun little kill spell that draws us a card, and he's a 2/2. It's very worst. This guy is a 2 mana 2/2 that will kill a token. Very worst. Miscutter Hydra is just kind of keyword. It's got like good keywords on it. Just can't be countered, which is great. Haste pro blue, so kind of annoying to deal with. And it enters the battlefield, with X counters on it. We can just load this thing up and really just smack someone really, really bad with it. Like, you can't counter it, like, you can't bounce it, like, you got to have a kill spell on it. And it can attack right away. Nexus, I guess. 2-mana 2/2. Basic lands you control have tap, add 2 colorless to only cast X spells. We have a good amount of basics in the deck. We need those basics just because we have cards literally like Nexus and cards like Kodama that require having a lot of basics. Nyxbloom Ancient triples our mana. Our whole deck relies on making a lot of mana to make our guys absolutely huge, and Nyxbloom Ancient makes that happen. Easy example, right? Nexus and Nyxbloom Ancient on the field now makes our basic lands tap for 6, which is cool. Primordial Hydra enters the battlefield with X counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of counters on him, and then he has trample as long as he has 10 or more counters on him. He's gonna go pretty nuts pretty quick. Like, he's a problem, if unchecked for too long, because he's only gonna get worse and worse. Rampaging Yaoguai is a brand new card from Fallout, and I love Fallout. Vigilance Trample enters the battlefield with some counters on it, and then when he enters the battlefield, destroy any number of target artifacts and or enchantments with total mana value X or less. Cool thing about this guy is X can be 0, so you can just pop pretty much like every artifact token on the field, or you just do what makes the most sense and just get rid of the most problematic ones. It's great. He's huge. Now we have OG Rosheen Meanderer. Great card, 4 mana 4/4. Same thing with current Rosheen. You just tap it, add 4, only do it for X spells. Here's the thing though, right, is new Rosheen, they're both good. New Rosheen just has a much bigger upside because it essentially draws us a card and it'll tap for so much more. The cards are essentially interchangeable, but new Rosheen's way better. Savage-Born Hydra enters with X counters on it, and it has double strike. Then you can pay 2 mana to put a 1/1 counter on it, but we can only do it whenever we can do a sorcery. This guy enters and he's huge and he has double strike and we can put counters on him. I mean, he'll just in the game. Like, if we have like something that gives him haste, that's a lot of damage real quick. Selvala, Heart of the Wild. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. We're probably going to have the biggest creatures, guys. I mean, unless like someone's playing Eldrazi, and even maybe not even that. Like, we have big guys. And then we can add a ton of mana equal to the strongest creature's power that we control. So if we like whip out a big guy with Rosheen paying like 6, and it enters as like a 6/6, we now like essentially net 5 mana off of that with Selvala and draw a card. It's pretty good. Shivan Devastator is kind of just a way that can just kill someone really, really easily because it has flying and haste, so it's hard to block and it can attack right away. Enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. Like, if we just like go nuts and like do a big amount of dumping with like Selvala and like Rosheen, it can be like, again, like a lot of these guys just have very high potential just to kill someone for being too big. Sporos, Ravenous Defender. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to X basic land cards and put them into play tapped. We do need to ramp in this deck. We just got to do it. Sporos is fine because it can be really big. Its mana cost having XX is awkward because it kind of like almost halves our mana in a little bit. So this guy's probably never going to be Ravenous. Like, he's just like cost too much. It costs like 11 mana for him to be Ravenous. It's a lot. Steelbane Hydra, it does the whole enters with counters things, and then we can pay 3 mana to remove a counter from him to destroy an artifact or enchantment. It's just good. Just on one of our best guys, just popping artifacts and enchantments. Stonecoil Serpent is pay whatever you can. He has reach, trample, and protection from multicolor, and he enters as a big guy. The protection from multicolor, I think, is huge, and also the reach is big because we do not have a lot of flyers in this deck because most Hydras just don't fly. Tervigon, assuming I'm pronouncing that right, enters the battle. He, has Ravenous, Trample, and then when he deals combat damage to a player, create that many Tyrannid creature tokens, 1/1 Tyrannids. So this guy is kind of like a way to just kind of like snowball out, where it's like we just have him be big, like even like say Ravenous, and we crash in for 5 damage. Like, we're just gonna make 5 1/1 guys like tokens. We don't care what happens to them as long as our big guys are fine. We don't care about the small ones. Tyrant Guard, he has the whole Ravenous thing, and when we can sacrifice him, Creatures you control with counters on him gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Tyrant Guard is really good for a lot of reasons, but I mean, the draw, well, not even a lot of reasons. The reason he is good is because he can just sacrifice himself, take one for the team, and save all of our guys with counters on him. If someone tries to nuke or do whatever. And it's so good because we can tutor him out with like Court of Calling and a lot of good things we can do with this guy. Vasus Hydra does the whole Hydra thing, and then when it dies, you can just redistribute its number of 1/1 counters to other guys. So it's like we just redistribute the counters if he dies, just so like the mana's essentially not lost. We don't want him to die, but like again, the whole Hydra, like if they do die, it's not that big of a deal. We have Vasus Hydra, which is a modal guy. We pick which one we want to do. He's going to enter the battlefield with X counters on him, and then when he enters, we can either double the number of counters on him, or we can have him fight a creature we don't control. Odds are, guys, he's not going to lose that fight because he's going to be huge. Then we have Xenagos, God of Revels. Don't really care about the devotion. He's indestructible, whatever, you know, the whole god devotion thing. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gets haste and +X, where X is that creature's power. Being a haste enabler, and it's really being haste is huge, and also doubling up the guy is huge, because again, most of them have trample, so that's a lot of damage. Going into sorceries, Jesus. Animist's Awakening, right? Green X, reveal the top X cards of your library, put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Spell Mastery, yeah, we have 2 or more instant or sorceries in our graveyard prior to casting this. We untap those lands. We're probably not going to have that. We do not have a lot of instants and sorceries. Maybe like 15 tops. I don't know. It's possible, actually. But yeah, I mean, we just pay a lot. We just pay a big X to get a ton of lands. Sounds good to me. Banefire, deal X damage to target creature or player. If it's 5 or more, can't be countered, and damage can't be prevented. Really good. Again, like, this is a kind of cards that can just straight up kill people, right? Like, these are the ones that are just like, I'm going to laser you for all my mana. I'm going to tap Rosheen for as much as I can, and I'm going to make you take 20 to your face. Like, that's really good. Genesis Wave, we talked about a little bit with Genesis Hydra. It's kind of the same thing. Reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with mana value X or lesser among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way, basically into the grave. It's tricky, because on one hand, we want to hit all of our utility creatures, and we want to hit our artifacts and our enchantments and whatever. But on the other hand, we don't want to hit any of our creatures that have like X in them, because they're just getting milled. Well, I guess they're going to get milled either way. I think it's fine. There's Hell to Pay, deals X damage to target creature, and then we make a tapped number of treasures equal to the excess damage. It's just a kill spell. Nature's Lore, just for easy ramping. Reap the Past, return X cards at random from your graveyard to your hand, and then you exile Reap the Past. Rosheen mills 6 cards on ETB, right? Just being able to like dump a ton of mana into Reap the Past to get most, if not all of them back, is going to be really good. Shatter Skull Smashing, there's a land on the backside of it. It can be untapped. It's just a mono red land if you want it. But it's really just a kill spell. Deals X damage divided among up to 2 target creatures, and then if X is 6 or more, it deals twice that damage divided. So it's just a big kill spell for the most 2 problematic guys. 3 visits Nature Lore, they're literally the same exact card. Get a shock land or whatever out of it. And then Wildest Dreams is kind of better Reap the Past. It's harder to cast because of the XX, but return X cards from your graveyard to your hand, and then we exile Wildest Dreams. So it's good. The idea is, like, if we mill anything, it's our way to get our stuff back. Going into instance, we have Court of Calling. Like, that's stuff that can get, like, Tyrant Guard right on the battlefield if someone's going to nuke or something like that. But either way, we just search our deck for creature with mana value X or less, put it on the battlefield. It has Convoke, so we can tap our guys if we need to cast it. Probably won't do that, but either way. Comet Storm is a very real way to kill someone in this deck, because it has a multi-kicker. Choose any target, then choose another target for each time this spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. So the ideal way to play Comet Storm is we say each of our opponents, and then we amass as much damage as we can with Rosheen. Again, none of these cards, they have potential to kill. Like, all of them do. but not when people are at like 40 life. You know, it's just not when they're at 40 life. When they're at like 20 life now, we're talking a little bit more realistic. But again, we're not like, it's not going to be like an instant, like, oh, we somehow tapped Rosheen and had a ton of mana. That's very unlikely to happen. But again, this can very well kill people like at 20 life or below. Electro Dominance is a good card because it deals X damage to any target, again, X, whatever. Then we may cast a spell with mana value X or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. That's the part that's really nice because we can cheese in like big mana rocks or funny enchantments or like whatever, right? It's like not only is it a kill spell, not only is it a spell that can kill someone, kill a player or a creature, but then we get a free spell from our hand. We also have Heroic Interventions in case someone nukes. We have a Kaluth Will because we're planning on always having Rosheen when we can. If we ever Commander do both, deals X damage to each creature without flying. It's probably not going to kill our guys just because they're big. Really, 4 or greater kills our guys. Really Rosheen. But the main reason we want it is destroy up to X target artifacts or enchantments. That's pretty much why we want it. Just like to do a big sweep of any kind of problematic enchantments or stuff that would stop us from attacking or hurt our creatures or whatever. Legolas's quick reflexes is really good because the way I imagine this card is we tap Rosheen, add like, let's say 8. We have 4 cards in our hand, why not? 4 X spells. Tap Rosheen, add 8 to our mana pool, tap a forest we have, on split second, which is pretty much uncounterable, untap Rosheen, right? Then tap Rosheen again, get another 8 mana, so now we have 16 mana to only cast X spells, and then since Rosheen just became tapped, it's going to kill a creature, because Rosheen is a 4/4, and I'm sure we can find a card to kill that has toughness 4 or less. And then the final card is Street Spasm. I've literally never seen this card before. Deals X damage to target creature without flying we don't control, or it has Overload XX2, which is probably how we're going to do it because it's way more realistic. You may cast a spell for its Overload cost, so then it deals X damage to each creature without flying we don't control. So it's like a one-sided board wipe, really. Going into artifacts, we have Arcane Signet because it's a good rock. We have Chamil the Inner Sun, just so our spells can't be countered, because we don't want to spend like our entire turn casting one huge spell just for it to be countered. That would make us very sad. And then at the beginning of our end step, we can discover 5. Discover really means like look at exile the top cards of your deck until you get a mana value 5 or less. We can either cast it for free, or if we don't want to cast it, put it into our hand. So if it's basically, we're going to want to cast it pretty much all the time, unless it's like a combat trick or whatever, or an X spell, right? X spells just go to our hand. Like cards like enchantments or artifacts, like we just cast them for fun. Why not? Elementalist's Palette, 3 mana, huge card for this deck. When you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, put 2 charge counters on it. It's just a regular mana rock to tap for mana of any color. Or we can tap it and add a colorless for each charge counter on it. But then we can only do that mana, again, mana for costs that contain X. So it's great because it's just like a mana rock, and then the more we use it, like this thing can like very well just like end up tapping for like 10 mana later. Lightning Reaves, the idea is we play them on like turn 2 or 3, play Rosheen, tap Rosheen, get a bunch of colorless, and see what happens. Or it's also nice just to be able to like put it on Rosheen, right? Tap Rosheen, get a bunch of mana, cast a huge guy, put those sneakers on that guy can attack right away. Good. Magerite Stone, pay 1 mana, untap target creature. It's really just pay 1 mana, untap target Rosheen. Patriarch Seal is just a mana rock that again says untap target Rosheen. So we can do it multiple times in a turn. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. The Ozolith, whenever a creature leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, put you basically can put all the counters on the Ozolith onto a creature. Which is nice because if we have like, let's say 30 counters among creatures and then the board gets wiped and there's not much we can do about it, like now 30 plus one counters are on the Ozolith, and then we can just play a creature and then move all those 30 counters onto the Ozolith. So it's, the counters aren't lost. Skullspore Nexus, 8 mana that never really costs 8 mana. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control dies, make a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness equal to the total power of those creatures. And then we can pay 2 mana to double target creature's power until end of turn. A lot of reasons why I like this card. One, it costs 8 mana, but it never cost 8 mana. Realistically, if we just have Rosheen, right, -4, this thing costs 4 mana, or we draw this later after we already have a Hydra, all of our Hydras are going to be at least 5 or more. This thing now costs 2 mana. If our guys die, they are essentially replaced by a token. And then it's a combat trick because when we attack, no blocks, or our guys have trample anyway, so it doesn't matter. We double it up, they now take double damage. Or if someone wants to kill one of our guys, we double that creature up. That creature dies, it has double its power, so now it's really big, and now we get an extra big dinosaur fungus. Great, great card. 1000-Year Elixir, you may activate abilities of those creatures you control as though they had haste. Basically, we can tap Rosheen right away, and then we can pay 1 mana to untap Rosheen. That's really all it does, is we can tap Rosheen immediately as though she had haste, and then we can pay 1 mana to untap her. And then Thran Dynamo, just a nice, short, sweet 4 mana artifact that's going to add 3 colorless to our pool. Again, if Rosheen doesn't exist, we need alternatives. We are a big mana deck at the end of the day, and even with Rosheen on the board, it's just an extra 3 counters to our guy, an extra whatever. It's still really good. Going into enchantments, OB1 is one of my favorite cards in the deck. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, OB1 deals that much damage to target opponent, creature, an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So let me paint you a picture. You have Rosheen on the field, you tap Rosheen, you get 8 mana, you use that 8 mana and like 2 forests, you play an 8/8 Hydra, whatever, right? Since you put 8 1/1 counters on that creature, OB1 will deal 8 damage to a player, basically an opponent, one of their creatures, or one of their planeswalkers. Just for existing, just for already doing what we want to do. That card has this just deals so much damage. Branching Evolution, it basically just doubles up our 1/1 counters. If we put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a creature, twice that many. So again, in that instance, with OB1, we tap for 8, we play a guy that costs 8, he really is a 8 doubled to 16. Now we deal 16 damage to whatever we want, probably an opponent. Garruk's Uprising, when it enters the battlefield, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Most of our guys are going to enter the battlefield with power 4 or greater, so we'll pretty much always be drawing a card. He gives our creatures trample, and then, yeah, he draws a card if we have a big creature, and then whenever they enter. And he gives them trample. Great card. Helix Pinnacle is my all-time favorite card in the deck. There's nothing that triumphs it, and when I saw Rosheen get spoiled, it made me think of Helix Pinnacle, and it made me want to make this deck list. It is a 1-mana enchantment with Shroud. Pay X. Put X tower counters on Helix Pinnacle. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 100 or more tower counters on Helix Pinnacle, you win the game. If there is a deck to make Helix Pinnacle work, it is definitely Rosheen. And really, think of it, it's you just have leftover mana from casting a spell, or you don't have any action to go on. You can just dump mana into Helix Pinnacle, or very reasonably, you can go on your upkeep. If Helix Pinnacle is close, you can reveal with Rosheen and just dump everything you can into it. Very easily win the game like that. Not easily win the game, but I mean, Rosheen makes a lot of mana. Rhythm of the Wild to make our creature spells uncounterable and to give our non-token creatures Riot. Riot just means enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter or haste. Our guys are already big, so ideally, haste. And Unbound Flourishing is the Hydra Expel card. Whenever you cast a permanent spell with a mana cost that contains X, double the value of X. I mean, come on, guys, come on. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery or activated ability, if the spell's mana cost or ability's activation cost contains X, copy that spell or ability. You may choose new targets. That actually will double up Helix Pinnacle. That's kind of cool. But yeah, no, it just basically doubles up all of our X spells. If we have a huge Hydra, that Hydra is now doubly big. If we do a Comet Storm, that Comet Storm is now doubly big. That's great. The final enchantment is up to Beanstalk, just because all of our guys are going to have big mana costs. I mean, they cost 2 and then X, or they'll just cost 1 and X, but the mana cost is counted as the spells being cast, so that Hydra is going to be have a mana cost of 6 or so, whatever it is. So we're going to draw a card off that a lot. Going into lands, we just have Castle Garenbrig. Nothing crazy about it. just because it's all it really does is nets us 1 mana. We can pay 4 mana and tap it to get 6 green. It nets us 1 mana profit off of that. Cinder Glade is nice because we have a lot of basics. We have Command Tower because it's Command Tower. Firelit Thicket's nice because some of the cards we have are like triple green or like double red, and it's awkward to filter, so now we can filter. Kessig Wolfrun's great because it has an X in the cost, so we can use Rosheen's ability for this, which is just like a big pump spell if we want. We have Nykthos just because we have a lot of green and red pips, mostly green pips in the deck, and that's just another big mana card to help us count up those big X spells. Rockfall Veil is pretty much always going to enter untapped. Rootbound Crag is always going to enter untapped, most likely. Spire Garden, assuming you're in a pod of 4/3 opponents, it's going to enter untapped. And then the final non-basic land, we have Stomping Grounds. We can just get this with like Nature's Lore or 3 visits. Going into the final lands, we have 14 forests and 11 mountains just because we are so much more green heavy than we are red heavy. I think it's like 36 lands total, including Shatter Skulls passing, whatever that card is. Either way, 36 lands. Rosheen's mana deck. We have a lot of mana, like generation in the deck. Honestly, guys, that's all I got for you. My voice is super hoarse. Get the cards you guys need from TCG Player down below. Comment, subscribe, like, and I will see you next time.